When I need answers about anything to do with personal growth, I go straight to my mom and my aunt. Here they are, Priscilla Babin and Tina Gilliat with the sister sauce.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Sister Sauce. I'm Priscilla, and I'm here with my beautiful sister, Tina. Hello, Tina.
Hello. Hello, Priscilla. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Hello. How are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm
You
doing
doing
good.
good?
Yeah.
Tina can attest that I am a little crazy today, but I'm here. So,
I see. I wasn't going to tell anybody that you were crazy. I was going to pretend that you were acting perfectly normally. And, you know, we're all we're all entitled to a little crazy every once in a while.
yeah, a little distractible,
For
little, little
us
paranoid.
ADHD people, it's more often than not.
True. It's every day. Do you have any hot sauce today?
I do. You know I do.
I do know you do. I don't know why.
My hot sauce is about food safety. So,
Oh,
you and I were having a conversation last week about salmon, and you mentioned to me that you're careful about eating salmon because of the mercury content in salmon and fish in general and seafood in general. And when you said that to me, I got all nervous because I eat a lot of salmon and fish and seafood because I try to eat healthier and I usually eat things that are seafood and grilled chicken, that sort of thing. And I started to think maybe I'm eating too much of these foods because of the high mercury content. And full honesty, I never ever thought it was an issue unless you were pregnant. And since I have never been pregnant in my life, I've never been concerned about mercury content. But you and I both started Googling and reading about it. And obviously there were articles that said it's not that big of a deal. Don't worry about it. But there were also articles that said, well, you shouldn't eat salmon more than 2 or 3 times a week. And in combination with other seafood, you have to be careful. And salmon is actually one of the safer ones, according to most of what we read. But it got me to thinking about it. And I actually have a doctor's appointment coming up in a couple of weeks. And my doctor sent a message saying, is there anything particular that you're concerned about? And I wrote back and said, well, if I'm going to get labs done, if there's any way you can include a test just for mercury level, because I eat a lot of seafood and I just want to be safe. So that was, last Sunday, Monday, whatever. And then I was watching one of the investigative channels on TV this week, and there was a story about this young boy who almost died, and no one knew what was wrong with him. He apparently just had a stomach ache, and his parents thought that he was just having a virus, and he had diarrhea, and he took something to stop the diarrhea, like a modal or whatever. And the stomach pains got worse, and he was very sick and running a fever. He gets to the hospital, they give him some medicine, he starts to feel better, they put him on IV fluids and all that stuff. And his mom decides she's going to reward him by buying him like a slushy, a cold slushy. And so she goes to get him that with permission from his doctor. And his doctor's like, yeah, if we can get him to drink something and keep it down and, not have any issues, that'd be great. So this kid starts drinking this thing and ends up like screaming in pain. Turns out his intestines had ruptured. And I'm not sure why it took them so long to figure that out. I think they just assumed it was virus and didn't do a scan right away. And so once he started screaming in excruciating pain, they did the scan, they discovered the rupture in his intestines, excuse me. But it was all related he had gone on this like camp out weekend with the Boy Scouts or some other group, and they had done a barbecue. And I guess like one of the days they did a barbecue and they had hamburgers on the grill. And one thing, it sounded like they were taking the hamburgers off the grill and putting them back on the same plate that the raw meat had been on, from what I understood. But the other part of it is that there was a small piece of raw ground meat on the plate with the cooked hamburgers. Well, this kid goes over to the table and is waiting to make himself a hamburger. And while he's waiting, the kid in front of him is taking his good old time. He reaches out and picks up this raw piece of ground meat that he thought was cooked and popped it in his mouth and ate it. Because he was around other people, he was embarrassed and he didn't want to spit it out. So he just swallowed it when he realized that it probably wasn't cooked, and then never gave it another thought. But when he was in the hospital, he woke up after the surgery. He wakes up and he's able to tell them that he dreamt that he ingested this ground meat that was raw, and it made him remember. And so as soon as he woke up, he told his parents, and they were able to give him medications or whatever to counteract the bacteria. But they just were treating symptoms at that point because they didn't know what was causing it. Anyway, it just made me think about food safety and how we could all benefit from a course in food safety. I know I certainly could, because I'm not educated at all with cooking. But yeah, so get some food safety training. Who wants to teach the class?
That makes me think, I always think of these things like, is this something that I've taught my kids? And then I end up texting the whole group of them, and like, adulting moment here, this is something to be aware of. But on the other hand, I feel like some stuff, they're pretty worldly. None of them eat very much fish, so I don't really have to worry about
the mercury thing's not an issue. Huh?
I mean, they would have to really be going through some cans of tuna, I think, probably, to worry about it. But yeah, for a full disclosure, I just assumed that you knew about the mercury.
I can understand why, because it's kind of supposedly common knowledge, but it was just one of those things. It's so funny sometimes. If you ever, AJ and I will be talking about something and he'll say something and I'll say, what? I didn't know that. And how can you not know that? Or vice versa. I might say it to him, like, how could you not know that? Everybody knows that. And there's so many things that you think are common knowledge, but if the person didn't happen to hear it or be told it by anyone, it's crazy. But yeah, that was one of those things for me, was the mercury. But the meat thing, oh my goodness. I preach to Liv all the time because she cooks grilled chicken sometimes. And I will tell her all the time, don't mix the raw and the cooked, and don't use the same fork for the raw and the cooked. And of course, we had a restaurant, so some food safety stuff I'm aware of because we had to go through the little Board of Health training and all that. But
I worked in the cafeteria. And
that's right.
So I had to do a training too. And so I've always been real careful about, like cutting boards and, like not using the same cutting boards when I'm cutting stuff up, unless I'm cutting, like a bunch of vegetables that's all going in my freezer. I'll do those on the same cutting board, but
vegetables are not as prone to bacteria as meats and
raw meats. Raw especially, and you don't want to cut any kind of meat, I don't think, in like cross contamination.
The
other thing, here's one. When you were explaining the story and talking about how they were having a barbecue, I thought and because he had the ruptured intestine, I thought you were going to say that he got one of those wire brush threads in his food and swallowed it.
Yeah.
Because I've heard of that too, where people clean their grill with the wire brush and don't rinse it. And then there'll be those wires will come out of the brush and stick to the griddle, to
Yeah.
the grill, to the metal. And then you put the burger on there and it gets the wire in it.
Mm-hmm.
And you could swallow that and it could chop you up inside. It could tear
Oh
you up.
yeah. Do you worked in a cafeteria, so you probably are familiar with the bricks that they use to clean grills in a cafeteria.
Mhm.
Well, we had one like that in our restaurant, and so I was familiar with it. But we went to eat one time at a restaurant, and I won't say the name of the restaurant, but it PJ had ordered a brownie with ice cream on top for dessert. And he got the ice cream with the brownie, and he kept saying, "This just tastes really bad." And we thought that he had just had his eyes were bigger than his stomach. So at first we were like, "Come on, PJ, you made us spend the money for this, and now you're not going to eat it." And I said, "I'll eat it." And I took it and took a bite and was like, "Oh my gosh, you're right. It tastes horrible. It tastes like chemicals." And AJ took it and tasted it and said the same thing. And he like broke it apart and it had a piece of that brick in it. Now, what they were doing with brownies on a grill, I have no idea unless maybe they were cleaning the oven and there was a piece on the rack in the oven and it dropped into the brownies while it was cooking. But
Yes.
nevertheless, and I think, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that child said something and did not eat that. And they wound up, taking it off our bill and comping us something else, some other kind of dessert. But yeah, it was crazy. And now whenever I eat anything that doesn't taste right, I especially if it's got a chemical kind of taste. I think I told you a couple of weeks ago, Liv had a bottle of water and she said it tasted weird and she handed it to me and I tasted it and it tastes like chemicals. And so the
Mm.
only thing we could figure was that the water from being in our garage, there were a few days where the power went out in our garage and we didn't know it. And so it wasn't cool in there. We have a window unit and the fuse had tripped. And so we had all those bottled waters that were part of the last case that was left. And we ended up throwing them all away because we didn't want to take the chance of getting sick from them. The only thing we could think of is maybe the plastic in the bottle was breaking down because they say don't leave them in the car. But I heard that was a myth. I heard that that was not true. But whatever was going on with this water, it tasted like a chemical. So we pitched the whole rest of the case that was left because we just didn't want to take a chance. But yeah,
Yeah, it's better
food
safe than
safety.
sorry. Yeah, if
Yeah,
something doesn't taste right, don't
exactly.
eat or drink it. I know sometimes it's
Exactly.
really disappointing because, maybe you paid money for it or whatever, a lot of money sometimes. I can't tell you after one after I think it was after Hurricane Ida and we had lost power. I had to throw a whole bag of salmon away. I cried.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's expensive
Like
too.
the whole bag of salmon that full of mercury. No. No. Really though, the people who need to watch out for their mercury are the ones who eat seafood like every day, especially like the heavy stuff like shark and the like what's the other one? I was thinking of it before, now I can't remember. Swordfish.
Oh
Swordfish
yes, I do
mercury.
remember reading that. Yeah.
Yeah, some of them, the real gamey ones, the real bigger fish, those are the ones with the more mercury in
Seems
them. But
crazy to me.
but tunas are pretty big and salmon are,
What did they do back in Jesus' day? Did people
I
get
don't know.
mercury poisoning? No, they lived to be 150. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe they didn't get as maybe they ate more little fish that
Oh,
didn't
that's
have them.
probably true. It's probably true.
They probably didn't get a lot of big fish.
Yeah.
And loaves. Lots of loaves. How were they not all obese from eating all that bread all the
The
time?
loaves and fishes. They probably ate healthy.
Well, they
They
had to walk
probably only
everywhere.
ate a little bit. They probably had portion control down to a
Yeah.
science.
They probably ate a lot of vegetables and a
Mhm.
lot of and they only had water to drink and wine. And they walked everywhere. All the
Oh, wow.
jobs were manual labor, except for scribes and Pharisees and rabbi. I don't know. Oh well. Well, today we're celebrating Grandparents' Day. And so we thought we would talk about some of our grandparents and grandparents. There is a website for Grandparents' Day. It's grandparentsday.org. Do something grand is the header on the website right now. And it says celebrate Grandparents' Day, September 8th, 2024, throughout the months of September. This year's theme is Grand Minds Learn, Love, Legacy. So that I like that. It's somewhat alliterative. And you talked about creating a legacy last week, so
I sure
perfect
did.
timing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there's some other good information there if you want to check it out. There's ways to celebrate and things that you can do. There's a take action guide, and there's also something called Generations United is excited to invite you to Grandparents Week, hosted by our partner, grandparentsacademy.com. Their partner, not our partner. It's the largest virtual educational conference and celebration for grandparents of its kind. So that's pretty cool.
Interesting. Yeah,
So if you're a
interesting.
grandparent and you want to learn some stuff, I guess that's where you can do it. And there's tickets that you can register in advance for it. So check that out if you're a grandparent or if you have a grandparent and you want to send them over there. And there's all kind of stuff, activities you can do. And even if you don't live close to them, how you can celebrate. So those are some things that you can take a look
That's
at.
awesome. Well, as you know, a while back, I did some research on our paternal grandmother. And Dad was really good about telling stories. You know that. He talked about all his fishing trips and he told us some war stories from when he was in the army. Um, but we didn't really know a lot about his dad. And so all of us were kind of intrigued and started digging a little bit. And I actually ended up giving a speech about it in Toastmasters. But when Eric, our brother, actually stumbled across a Google, in a Google search of different people's names, he stumbled across some information relative to a lawsuit. And he texted it to me and he said, "This might interest you." So, what we knew about our dad was that he was the youngest of six kids. There were three girls and three boys. And there was quite a space between, I don't remember offhand how much older Dad's oldest sister was than him, but there was some space in there. And so he was the youngest of six kids. And we never got to meet his dad because our dad was only two when his dad died. But and then our grandmother died actually before you were born, but I remember her. And she died when I think I was about 8 years old. But I do have some memories of her, and we don't have any photographs though, because I think all that we had, at least in our household, were destroyed by Hurricane Katrina. But she lived in Gentilly and we would go visit her. And I mean, all I remember of her was that she would always be sitting in the same overstuffed chair and I would sit on her lap sometimes and she would read to me or talk to me. But her name was Amelia Wellmeyer, Wellmeyer being her married name, and Schultz being her maiden name. And interestingly enough, Eric was Googling, and I don't know if he Googled Schultz or Wellmeyer or what, but he found this lawsuit. It was a lawsuit filed by our grandmother relative to our grandfather's death. And the link he sent me was on casetext.com. Well, I started Googling additional information about the case by looking at the case number and all that. It really intrigued me. And so what I found was that there were two other websites, casemind.com and courtlistener.com, that both talked about the case. And so the lawsuit was relative to our grandfather's death. And what it was our grandmother was trying to raise 6 children, the youngest of whom was 2, and lost her husband. And so as you can imagine, she was in a financial situation there where she had to take care of these 6 kids, and she needed the money to do that. And so the lawsuit was relative to a workman's comp sort of death benefit. Anyway, the lawsuit was filed under our grandmother's maiden name for some reason. I'm not sure why, but it was Schultz versus L. Mundit Son, which was apparently the company that our grandfather worked for. And back then, it was common for people to die of tetanus, or what they referred to as lockjaw. But our grandfather had died, and we always had been told, I'm sure you remember, that Grandpa Wellmeyer had died of lockjaw or tetanus. And that's what I thought. But as I was reading all of this information on the lawsuit, what I discovered was that they really didn't know that for sure that he had died of tetanus or lockjaw. He just died. But the lawsuit was alleging that he had died after he burned himself on the job, and the burn became infected with the tetanus virus. So she was suing for this workman's comp death benefit. And she lost in civil court, but then it had advanced to the Louisiana Court of Appeals. Interesting. So what did they do? Now we're talking about like back in the 1930s, early 1930s. They actually exhumed our grandfather's body for this appeals court case. And it was 9 months after he died. And they had these really prestigious doctors that got involved in this lawsuit. Now, when Grandpa Wellmeyer died, the coroner had ruled his death a result of heart disease. And out of 10 doctors who ended up investigating and examining the body and testifying, only 2 of them really believed it was because of tetanus. The other 8 agreed with the coroner that it was probably a result of heart disease. But there was sort of this impression that I got that made me think that they just didn't want to make the coroner look bad. But I don't know if I was reading more into it than what was there. But there were 2 doctors who strongly believed that he died of tetanus out of the 10 that testified. But here's the problem with it. Our grandfather also had an injury on his other hand where he had punctured his finger from a fish hook when he was fishing. So it had nothing to do with his work injury. And so it was difficult to say if he did have tetanus, what was the portal for the tetanus virus? Was it the fishhook wound or was it the burn wound? Both of which appeared to possibly be infected. So the end result was that the Louisiana Court of Appeals also denied the claim and said that this is the quote, "The plaintiff must show a preponderance of the evidence with legal certainty that the subsequent disease was caused by the specific accident. So by the accident. So unfortunately, my grandma did not win her case and she lost her case. But this is the cool thing about our grandmother. Here she was, this widowed woman with 6 children, trying to raise them and trying to make money. And she took this case to court and she fought for her rights. And while she didn't win, she was pretty tough. She was a tough grandma and she had a cause and she worked at trying to win. And although she didn't, another interesting thing about the case was that between 1934 and 1970, 5 additional lawsuits cited Schultz versus Elmond Son. And of those 5, an additional 84 cases cited those 5. So it was sort of a ripple effect, like a snowball effect. So there's 5 cases used grandma's case to as citations to say, this is the way the precedent that's been set by this case. And then of those 5, an additional 84 were cited from them or cited them. So it was like this huge snowball involving like almost 90 cases, court cases, as a result of grandma's. Unfortunately, it was a negative sort of thing because they were citing the case that we lost, that grandma lost. But I just thought that was the coolest thing. I was really excited about it. And wanted to share that with our listeners that we had a tough grandma.
Yeah.
We actually had 2 tough grandmas.
Yes, we did. Our mom's mom, Hazel, she had she was a very little lady, but she had a very big personality.
Spunk. She had spunk.
She had moxie.
Yes, she did.
She had spirit. She was fierce. And you didn't, nobody crossed grandma. Not like she was not mean. She was loving and sweet, but she stood her ground on everything. And she was very authentic, very outspoken. Like she spoke her mind. She was not meek and mild, but she was loving and she loved her family and she was a kind person. She was never mean, but she was herself. And I think that's the thing about her that I appreciated the most. I remember going to her funeral service and the 2 of us sitting there and giggling the whole time and getting dirty looks from people who didn't know us as well. I don't know if it was people from her church or what.
Yeah. Because we were remembering some of the funny stories that we had about her.
She was spicy.
She was. She was. She was a trip.
Saucy.
I'll never forget when she was in the nursing home. She was in the Lutheran home, and I would occasionally go there with Lester or Tommy when we were having church services there, and I would play the piano for them. And mom and I took turns doing it. And I remember going there and seeing grandma, and she would see me and she really, she wasn't 100% with it. But when she saw us, she recognized us. And I remember how excited she was when we would visit her on Sunday. And she died right after PJ was born. Not long after, a few months after. So I was thankful that she got to see him. But that was one of the funny things was that she knew I had not been pregnant. She was sure I hadn't. And I think Liz, if you listen in, Liz, you are a bad girl. I think Liz tried to convince her that I had been pregnant, but we of course adopted PJ. And it was funny because I remember her saying, no, you were not pregnant. And Liz kept saying, yeah, Grandma, she was pregnant. But she
I
was a
remember,
trip.
I remember going when we would go to see her in a nursing home. We would go in sometimes and she'd be sitting there crying and saying, nobody comes to see me. And as soon as she saw us, she would just be like, oh, hey,
Yeah, real
nothing
casual,
was
like,
wrong. And then sometimes she would get mopey while we were there. And all you had to do was pull out the donuts and say, have a donut, Grandma. And she would perk right up. And she was like, oh, all
I
right.
forgot about that.
She loved her sugar. That's probably why she had so many strokes.
I'm sure. I also remember there was at least one occasion where we were all sitting there, and as you know, like all of the cousins and everybody, as many of us, we were all like, it was like an open invitation on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we're all going to see Grandma. And so a lot of our cousins and family members would be there visiting her. And so sometimes there were like 10 of us at a time visiting Grandma, and we would all be in that little community room and she
Mm-hmm.
would be at the table with us. And there was at least one occasion, possibly more, where we would be in the middle of a conversation and we would be trying to include her. And all of a sudden, she would just back her wheelchair up and leave. And it'd be like, I guess the visit's over. She was so funny. And
Yeah.
I know that she was it was funny for her. Well, you and I were blessed in our brothers that we lived right around the corner from her. So we were
Mm-hmm.
always at Grandma's house. The other cousins all lived further away, but we lived right around the corner. So we were always over there. And even
Yeah.
after I got married, there was a period of time where for like 2 years, I lived across the street from her. And I would
Mm-hmm.
go over there all the time, day and night, and hang out with her or check on her or whatever. And I know how funny she was when you and I both got um, serious about boys, because I don't think she ever thought I would get married, you know. And she gave our husbands a hard time. You aren't married yet to Ken, but I remember Grandma picking at him and
Mm-hmm.
picking at AJ for sure. AJ drove her crazy. Oh my goodness. They loved each other, but it was funny.
Yeah.
But
There was,
Audrey reminded me of Grandma as she got
mm-hmm.
older, and
Yeah.
Mom too, somewhat, but not quite as much. But I think that both Ian Audrey and Mom got their like strength from Grandma.
Mm-hmm.
They're both very strong ladies, and I think they got that from Grandma, because Grandma was like a typical housewife, always had the dinner on the table, had to get home before so she could cook and put dinner on the table for 5 or 5:30, whatever it was that Grandpa was used to coming home from work and eating. Even when they were older and he was retired, it would be like, well, Grandma, just call Grandpa and tell him that we'll bring some food. And she's like, nope, we're not bringing food. I'm going home to cook for my husband. And she was like a traditional wife in that way, but she was also sassy.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't hesitate to stand up for herself, and
Yeah.
cool lady.
I
I
remember
guess we
one
should get a
time,
little bit of, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I remember one time, like she was very casual about people coming over and hanging out. And so my husband went to school very near her house. So he would walk or drive over and hang out with me at her house after I'd get home from school, because I always went straight to grandma's house all the way through high school, right after I would get home, and I would stay over by her house until mom got there after she got off work. And so we'd be hanging out in her den, and she had a den and kitchen kind of combo big room on the back of the house. And I remember Ken going to get a drink out of the refrigerator or something, and she walked up and smacked him on the butt. And it was another time she had these like polyester pantsuits, little matching outfits, little
Yeah.
shirt with a collar and the pants, and they were polyester and they were bright colors, and she had like every color of the rainbow. And she had one on one day, and these fake fabrics, the buttonholes, it was before we had stuff that was legit, like meant to be stretchy. And so her buttonholes were getting like out of whack. And so her buttons kept opening and you could see all the front of her. And she had, I don't want to get too descriptive, but her shirt was hanging open. I'm like, Grandma, your shirt is hanging open. And she's like, so what? And I was like, well, Ken's coming over here. And she went and opened the back door, which is the way everybody would come in the house, would to go around the back and come in the back door.
Yeah.
And she opened the back door and stood in the doorway and said, come and see me, Ken. Get a good look.
Sassy.
And I'm like, oh my God.
She was
Calm
so
down.
sassy, huh? Mm-mm. Yeah,
I
you
don't
are over there
remember
all the
Grandpa that
time.
much.
What?
Yeah, I don't remember Grandpa as much.
Yeah, he got sick when you were younger.
I was in like
And
5th grade.
yeah. But when you were a baby, Grandpa, you were like the light of his eyes. I always joke that I was Grandpa's favorite until you came along. I don't know if I ever really was his favorite. He never let on a lot about how he felt about us. But when you came along, oh my goodness, because you grandma babysat you every
Mm-hmm.
day when you were a baby. And so you were like one of his kids, and he just looked forward to it. And I remember that when I was in high school, I would drop you off at grandma's to get dressed for like kindergarten. And then I would go to bring mom to work. And then I would come back, pick you up, drop you at kindergarten, and then I would go to high school.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just my senior year because that was your kindergarten year, was my senior year. And it was funny because grandpa would be like waiting at the door for you to come. And then it would be this big production when we left to bring you to school. It was just so funny. But yeah, grandpa worked in the chemistry department, I think, at Tulane University. He was a lab assistant, if I remember my facts straight. But he was very knowledgeable man. He knew a lot about a lot of different things about chemistry. He knew a lot about um,
Gems and
rocks,
minerals.
gemstones and rocks. What's that called?
Minerals.
Geology.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, he knew a lot about that kind of stuff, and he made beautiful jewelry and really was good with that kind of stuff. We used to enjoy going to the Gem and Minerals show whenever he had something on display. And I believe he won some ribbons. And he had a good friend, Joe Collada, that was on the radio on WTIX AM, I think, back in the day. And he had a morning talk show on Sunday mornings, and Grandpa would go on that talk show. And I actually had found at one point in Googling some transcripts of like Grandpa. And supposedly there were like associated recordings somewhere, but I don't think I ever actually found the recordings. But I thought it would be interesting to find that and we could listen to his interviews. But he would talk about all kinds of stuff. He liked to read about witchcraft and
Yeah.
you
He
know,
had some weird interests.
it was a little creepy, yeah, but he loved all that kind of stuff. He was fascinated with it. But so we had some interesting grandparents and fun with that. And I wanted to share with our listeners too, the information that we found on Grandma Wellmeyer, we mostly found just from Googling. But if you get on ancestry.com or those sites and sign up for a membership, I know it's kind of pricey, but there are some pretty cool things you can find. I am not willing to make that investment right now.
Yeah.
But as you know, I did do the trial membership when I was looking for Dad's military records and I was having a hard time. I signed up for a trial membership at ancestry.com and I was able to find his discharge paperwork and also his draft card in ancestry.com. And I downloaded those while my trial was still good. So I at least got something out of it. And if it had not been a financial burden, I probably would have signed up for a
Mhm.
membership and done some more investigating, but I don't think I would have the time to invest to make the price of it worthwhile, but maybe one day. It was interesting though.
Hmm. Yeah. The library has some resources, I know, but I'm not sure off the top of my head. I know we did that whole episode about what the good stuff is at the library, but you might check your local library and see, what kind of things they can get you. Because I know you can access some of the like language learning stuff
Yeah.
at, maybe not the full subscriptions, but like partial for free through the library. I don't remember which ones of that either, but the same thing applies with the ancestry kind of stuff, and the genealogy searches and things. The library has, some of the libraries have some connections that you can get some free access.
I wanted to tell you about that. I'm so glad you brought up the library because we were watching one of the talk shows or news shows the other day, and they actually interviewed a lady that worked for a library, and she was talking about the wedding dress collection at the library. And you can go and check out a dress and return it, or you could keep it. That was one of the rules of that department. You could keep the dress, but people were sending their wedding dresses to this library, and she cataloged all the dresses. Isn't that amazing?
My goodness.
I
They should
immediately
do
thought
that with
about
like
you.
prom dresses and stuff.
Yeah. Prom dresses would be cool. But she had over 200 wedding dresses. And she was reading like people would send the dresses. I mean, it was clear that they needed to have a bigger room for these dresses because they were kind of crammed in there. I wish I could remember what city it was in. For some reason, I'm thinking it's somewhere in Florida, but I might be wrong. But it was interesting because she said they would get like dresses from all over the world. And that
Wow.
one family was in town visiting from India and actually came to the library and looked at the wedding dresses. So I guess they wanted a more Americanized wedding or whatever. And they took two of the dresses back home to India with them. And she said that they're allowed to keep the dresses if they want to, or they can just mail them back. And but the interesting thing was she was reading like some of the notes that came with the dresses. Like she would get the notes back from the person that either borrowed the dress or was donating their own dress to the library. And some of the notes were just so sweet about wishing the person well. And like the one woman shared, this was the wedding dress that I wore when I married my husband 38 years ago. And we've been married this long and we've had a very happy marriage with 3 children or whatever. I mean, I'm just paraphrasing, but it was just such a neat story that I immediately thought of you and your little investigation when we talked about libraries. And I said, oh, what a great thing to have at the library.
Yeah. Well, I saw a post from our library the other day about how they're expanding the lending library with kitchen appliances and all kind of stuff. And
That's
that is
awesome. I just
so
think that is
cool.
the coolest thing. Yeah. So go
Yeah.
to the library and look up some information and maybe write something. We tend to like buy grandma flowers or whatever. How about do something special for her?
Yeah.
Maybe research her family history or grandpa. Don't forget the grandpas. We always tend to do more for the grandmas and than the grandpas. But yeah, celebrate Grandparents' Day this weekend.
Mhm.
Make it special. So
Yeah.
it's Sunday today is Grandparents' Day, but the whole week is Grandparents' Week. So you have all week.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah. So you
What
can
would
do
you
that.
like us to marinate on this week, Priscilla?
Well, on the same sort of thread, we've been storytelling this morning about our grandparents. And grandparents are full of good stories to tell us too. So my marinade is a little bit about storytelling, but it's more from the perspective of if you are trying to, maybe if you want to be a writer, or if you want to be a filmmaker or something like that, and you're trying to tell a story to an audience and not just, amongst yourselves with your family. I saw a video of a class that was being taught by the two guys who were the creators of South Park. And I know that's not a popular show with everyone. It has some issues, but they're some smart guys, and their class they were teaching, one of the things they told the young people in the writing class that they were talking about storytelling, and they said one thing that they have always stuck to when they would write the storyline for an episode, or I believe they also wrote the musical, my mind's going blank. I can't think of the name of the musical. It's the one about Mormons, the Book of Mormon.
Oh yeah, Book of Mormon. Yeah.
I think they wrote that as well. But they were saying whenever they do any writing, they don't have like, this is what happens, and then this is what happens. And then they said if you have and then, it just destroys
Flat. Yeah.
destroys your the continuity, or the connection with the audience, because you lose the audience with those and thens, because stuff has to continue from one thing to another. So when you're storytelling, if you have a bit of information like Janice went to the bank and checked out and got her took out all her money, and it was $1 million. You wouldn't say, and then she went and bought a Ferrari or whatever. You have to have in between there, you need to have therefore or but. So either something's going to happen because of what has just happened, or something contrary is going to happen, even though this previous thing happened. So you're not just telling this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. It starts to drone, and it's just, you get bored and lost in all that. So you have to have some kind of path.
Ooh.
So it has to be, and then instead of and then, you would be, therefore, she had money to go buy a fancy car, but she crashed her fancy car on the way home from the dealership.
Oh my God.
Therefore, she was out of a lot of money, So
Yeah.
much more exciting than just being like, this happened and then this happened and then this happened. So that's an interesting take on storytelling. So if you want to be a storyteller, whether you like to do spoken storytelling, like the whole Moth series, or TED Talks, or if you want to be a author, or if you want to be a playwright or a filmmaker writing screenplays, you need to make sure you have your and thens set aside and make room for your therefores and your buts.
I love
Make room
that.
for your butts.
I love that. Now, nobody go rewind and re-listen to my story to see if I had and thens. I'm sure it was full of buts and therefores.
It was.
I love that, though. I love that. One of the things that you and I have talked about is with our mom. She has, and we talked about this when we were talking about legacy, is that mom has done so many wonderful things and projects and all that she's worked on. And we love that some of what she's done has been documented, but it's important to document things. If especially if you're like, if you don't have any children or grandchildren, where is that going to carry on? Like, who can you
Mhm.
document? Some people used to do it like with letters. They would write letters to loved ones, and I've seen movies where the whole story of somebody's life unfolds through reading of letters. And I just love
Mm.
that.
Yeah, that's like when we went to visit Renee in Texas last summer, the or 2 summers ago. I guess it was 2 summers ago. We had gone to see Renee in Texas, and we were not familiar with the Houston area, and she was at work, and so we needed to busy ourselves until she got off work, and we went to go eat, and after that, the next thing we had like an hour to kill, and I said, "Hey, look, there's this antique shop that's right near the library. So let's go see what they have." And one of the things we found that I ended up buying was a book of letters from, I think it's a Civil War soldier back home to his sweetheart. And it's all his letters and like backstory of whatever they could find about the two people. And it was so interesting. I had to have that. So that's in my book collection.
I'm just curious, were the letters like typed, like retyped for the book, or were
Yes,
they just images?
they have images, and then they
So both, yeah.
wrote it out, typed it out for the book so
Ooh,
that
I
you
love
didn't have to
that.
decipher the handwriting. Yeah,
Oh,
thank goodness somebody else deciphered the handwriting. So,
yeah, yeah, because I struggle reading just the printed word, just because my eyes are so bad. But that is really cool. I love that.
and that's a whole nother aside of how letter writing is. It's an art in its own
It
right.
is. It
It
really
really is.
is.
I have another book that's fictional, but it's all written from the perspective of two people who are kind of, it's a little bit sci-fi because they become sort of magically connected. It never says that, but you don't know how they found each other. Like it's two artists and they live in completely different places in the world. And the one starts dreaming about the artwork of the other one and somehow does research and finds out that they're the artist of these pieces of work that keep popping up in their dreams. And
Wow.
they start corresponding, and they, I think the other one starts to dream about the first one. And so they start corresponding. And so the whole book is actual, it's fiction, it's not real, but the book is made to look like real letters. So you open the letters and read them, and there's postcards with drawings on them.
Oh my gosh, I love
And
that.
you read it and you go back and forth, and it's like one telling the other, and they eventually, you know, they discuss their lives, and there's romance sort of erupts, and you don't know at the end they talk about we should meet, and then there's no more, and it's like you have to, you know, decide what you think happened if they got together and they didn't need to correspond anymore because they were together. So it's
Mhm.
pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool. One of the most devastating losses for me from the hurricane when we lost our house was losing all the love letters that AJ had written to me
Oh,
when he was living in California and I was here. He had to go live there for a couple of months for a job, and I was here in Louisiana, and we had only been married for about a year, I think, maybe not even that long. And he wrote me these beautiful letters telling me how much he missed me. And it was all things that he had really not said to me aloud.
mm,
And to read these letters, it just really was great for our relationship. You know, absence makes the heart grow fonder, or maybe it just makes you tell the person how you really feel. And I was sad when I lost those letters in the
mm.
hurricane. I didn't think to move the box upstairs, but anyway, yeah, I love that kind of stuff. Really cool. Well, it's been great episode. I'll be curious to hear what other people are doing to celebrate Grandparents' Day. Well, we have a lot to look forward to with the rest of September and October.
Mhm.
But until next time, make yourself a priority.
And take care of you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us. Make sure you subscribe to keep up on all the latest sauce. See you next time.